The next theorem is, let f and g be integrable functions over E, then the function cf, where c is finite, is integrable over E, and integral over E cf is equal to c into integral over E f. Second thing what we supposed to prove is, the function f plus g is integrable over E, and integral over E f plus g is equal to integral over E f plus integral over E g. If f is less than or equal to g almost everywhere, then integral over E f less than or equal to integral over E g. If even and E2 are disjoint measurable sets in E, then integral over E1 union E2 f is equal to integral over E1 f plus integral over E2 f. These four things we have to prove. If you observe, these three properties are very similar to your non-negative measurable functions. So don't get confused with this, okay? Let's prove one by one now. The first thing we supposed to prove is CF is integrable, correct? What they have given? They have given f is integrable. F is integrable means f plus and f minus are integrable. So this implies, if I say f plus is integrable means integral over E f plus is less than infinity, and integral over E f minus is less than infinity, correct? One more thing they have mentioned in data is C is finite. So if I multiply some finite value to this, again it will become less than infinity. So I can write this as integral over E C f plus is less than infinity, and integral over E C f minus is less than infinity. This is nothing but integral over E C f plus is less than infinity, and integral over E Cf minus is less than infinity, and you can express your Cf as Cf plus minus Cf minus. If this is integrable and this is integrable, obviously your Cf is integrable, correct? So the first part is over. You can prove that part as one more way, that is, they have given it as a finite, but they have not mentioned whether it is a positive or negative. If C is greater than or equal to 0, then you can write Cf plus is equal to Cf plus, and Cf minus you can express as C into F minus. If C is less than 0, that means in the case of C you have to write minus C, and in the place of F plus you have to write F minus. So similarly, Cf minus you can express as minus C F plus. So we know this is integrable, this is integrable, that means Cf is integrable, Cf plus and Cf minus. In both the case, Cf plus, Cf minus both are integrable. So the result now follows, since the integrability of f implies f plus and f minus also integrable. So conversely it is true. Okay, and this is true in all the cases, no need to prove this. The second part is, function f plus g is integrable over E, and integral over E f plus g is equal to integral over E f plus integral over E g. Given thing is f and g are integrable, correct? F and g is integrable means mod f is also integrable. G plus plus G minus. You can express like this, correct? So sum of those two will also be integrable. Mod f plus mod g is integrable. We know the fact from modulus property that mod f plus g will be less than or equal to mod f plus mod g. I have used this property here. So mod f plus g is less than or equal to mod f plus mod g. So from this we can conclude that f plus g is integrable. Now we have to prove this part, correct? let's move to that. Integral over E f plus g, I can express this as, I know what is f, that is f plus minus f minus, and g is nothing but g plus minus g minus. Substitute all these values here and group the terms as you want. I have considered positive parts first and negative parts later. Okay, so f plus g plus minus integral over E f minus plus g minus. So you can split this as integral over E f plus integral over E g plus minus integral over E f minus integral over E g minus, or you can write it as, you can group f terms one side and g terms to the other side. So you will get integral over E f plus minus f minus plus integral over E g plus minus g minus. This is nothing but f, this is nothing but g. So integral over E f plus g is equal to integral over E f plus integral over E g. This is nothing but second part of the proof. Now let's see this third part, that is, if f is less than or equal to g almost everywhere on E, f is less than or equal to g means f minus g is less than or equal to 0, or you can write g minus f is greater than or equal to 0 almost everywhere. Now you can express your g as g minus f plus f, correct? Apply integral on both sides. It will become g is equal to integral g minus f plus integral f, correct? So this is greater than or equal to 0, that means integral g is greater than or equal to integral f. This is the third part of the proof. Now the last part is, given even union E2 or disjoint measurable subsets of E. So you can, using characteristic function, you can write integral over E1 union E2 f is equal to integral f dot chi E1 union E2. This means f into chi E1 plus f into chi E2, correct? So integral f chi E1 plus integral f chi E2. How you can write this? Integral over E1 f, and this is nothing but integral over E2 f, that means integral over E1 f plus integral over E2 f. So this is the last part of the proof. The next topic is functions of bounded variation. Bounded variations, okay. Suppose if I consider a real valued function, say f. I'm defining this function in closed interval a comma b. Okay. The interval a comma b, that is closed interval a comma b, is divided into number of points or partition, correct? How you will define that partition? A is equal to x0 less than x1 less than x2 less than so on up to xn is equal to b. This is my partition for the function considered f on the closed interval a comma b. Now I will define t is equal to summation k is equal to 0 to n minus 1 modulus of f of x k plus 1 minus f of xk. Okay, I have defined my t as summation k is equal to 0 to n minus 1 f of x k plus 1 minus f of xk. That means my function is applied to all the partition, and I have taken modulus of those summation, sum of the values. Okay, now how I can define my bounded variation or function of bounded variation is the least upper bound of the set of all possible sum of t. Okay, that is least upper bound, that is nothing but supremum upper bound of the set of all possible sums t is called total variation. It's called total variation, which is denoted as t from A to B is equal to supremum of t. So supremum of t is nothing but my total variation. Okay, if this t total variation is finite, then my function f is function of bounded variation. This is how we will define bounded variation. I repeat, we are considering one function which is a real valued function in the interval, closed interval a comma b. The interval a comma b is divided by means of points or partition. My partition will be in this form, that is a is equal to x0 less than x1 less than x2 so on up to xn, which is equal to b. And we are defining t, sum t, as summation k is equal to 0 to n minus 1 modulus of f of xk plus 1 minus f of xk. If I take supremum to this t, I will denote that as t a to b, which is nothing but total variation of the function. So if t a to b is finite, then f is said to be function of bounded variation. Okay, so again for this t there is a positive part as well as negative part. I will define that as this p is a positive part, so p is equal to summation I is equal to 1 to m f of xi minus f of xi minus 1. You can consider in this form itself, no problem. Okay, and n is equal to, n is a negative part, summation I is equal to 1 to m f of xi minus f of xi minus 1. Since we are taking sum of these two, here we are getting modulus. Okay, you can observe that. So if I apply supremum to this p, I will denote that as capital P. Capital P is nothing but supremum of P, and capital N is nothing but supremum of N. So the capital T is supremum of small t. Okay, I have written that here P is a positive variation of f over a to b. I will denote that as P a to b, and N is negative variation of f over a to b. We are denoting it as N a to b. T is a total variation of f over a to b. We are denoting it as T a to b. Since it is obvious, right? T can never be greater than, it will be less than or equal to P plus N. This is the obvious thing. So obviously T will be greater than or equal to P. We are just considering one inequality by using the basic concepts. That's it. Okay. So if t is less than infinity, then we say that f is bounded variation. That means t is finite value. T a to b is finite. So using this concept, we have a theorem, that is, if f is bounded variation over a to b, then we have to prove t a to b is equal to p a to b plus n a to b, and f of b minus f of a is equal to p a to b minus n a to b. Okay, so let's consider one by one and we will prove. For any subdivision, that is for any partition of a to b, we have positive as well as negative part, that is p minus n. We know what is p, we know what is n, just substitute those values here. Now group the terms as you want, as it is as required. Okay, so f of xi plus minus f of xi minus 1 plus, this is a positive part, this is a negative part. Here what I have done is I have taken xi terms together and xi minus 1 terms together. Okay, summation I is equal to 1 to m f of xi plus minus f of xi minus as it is, summation I is equal to 1 to m f of xi minus 1 plus, so minus into plus it is minus, minus into minus it is minus into minus plus, so you will get plus here itself, that is f of xi minus minus. Okay, now this part is nothing but positive and negative part of xi, f of xi. This is positive and negative part of f of xi minus 1. So summation I is equal to 1 to m f of xi minus summation I is equal to 1 to m f of xi minus 1. Since both the summations are same, take it common, you will get f of xi minus f of xi minus 1. Expand the summation, you will get minus f of x naught plus f of xn. So that is nothing but f of xn minus f of x naught. Xn is the last one, correct? From your partition, a is equal to x naught less than x1 less than so on up to xn is equal to b. So f of xn minus f of x naught is nothing but f of b minus f of a. You can write this as p is equal to n plus f of b minus f of a. Now take supremum. I will consider this as equation star. If you take supremum, what you will get? This will become capital P, this will become capital N. So this will be capital P will be obviously greater value, lesser value, since you have some other terms here, n plus f of b minus f of a. Now you can write that as p minus n is less than or equal to f of b minus f of a. Again consider your equation star. You can write this as n is equal to p minus f of b minus f of a. Again take supremum on both sides. You will get n is less than or equal to p minus f of b minus f of a. Okay, so this will become f of b minus f of a is less than or equal to p minus n. So obviously p minus n will be greater than or equal to f of b minus f of a. Call this as inequality 3. Using inequality 2 and inequality 3, you can conclude that f of b minus f of a is equal to p minus n. So this part of the proof is over. This p is nothing but p a to b, n is nothing but n a to b. You can write if you want. Now this we know, correct? This is overall supremum and this is negative part and positive part. So overall supremum of t, that is total variation, will be greater than or equal to negative variation and positive variation. Using your equation 1, that is p is equal to n plus f of b minus f of a. Using your equation star, in the place of n you can write p minus f of b plus f of a plus p as it is. So this p will give you 2p minus f of b minus f of a. F of b minus f of a is equal to p minus n, we have proved here. So 2p minus p minus n. Now take supremum to this. You will get 2 into capital P minus p plus n. 2p minus p is capital P plus n. So t is greater than or equal to p plus n. But we know that t will be less than or equal to p plus n. We have seen in the introduction part itself. Total variation will not be greater than positive variation and negative variation. So this is the known fact. Using these two, you can conclude that t is equal to p plus n. So the second part of the theorem is also over. Thank you.